Okay, everyone, we're back with part 3 of this wild ride surrounding Vem Miller and his arrest near Trump's Coachella rally. At this point, we've heard a lot from the initial rumors of an assassination attempt to Mindy Robinson's defense of him as a huge Trump supporter. And now we've got some shocking new developments, including statements directly from Miller himself and investigative work from George Webb that raises some seriously unsettling questions. First off, let's talk about what Vem Miller has finally said. After staying quiet for a while, he spoke out in an interview with the Daily Mail, and let me tell you, it's quite a story. Miller says he's a Trump supporter through and through, and that he wasn't there to harm anyone, let alone the former president. He insists he's never even shot a gun in his life. You heard that right. The guy who was caught with a shotgun, a handgun, and a high-capacity magazine says he's beyond a novice when it comes to firearms. He claims he carries them in his car because of death threats, but that he's never fired a single round. Now, is that believable? I'm not so sure, but I'll leave that for you to decide. On top of that, Miller says the whole thing with the fake credentials and fake passports, it's all just a misunderstanding due to his Armenian heritage. He says there's been confusion because different people use his full birth name, Vem Venovkian, and others don't, to avoid what he calls anti-Armenian sentiment. So that's why he's got multiple names floating around, like Vem Steinberg, Vem Miller, and Vem Venovkian. Does that explain why he was caught with multiple passports? Not really, but it's the story he's going with. Now let's get into the really juicy part, George Webb's investigation. Webb has been digging deep into Miller's background, and what he's found is wild. According to Webb, Miller isn't just some random Trump supporter who got caught up in a misunderstanding. No. Webb suggests that Miller, real name, Vem Venovkian, is actually involved in something much bigger. Webb says that Miller has ties to NATO and the OSCE, which is a diplomatic arm used by NATO to manage operatives from former Soviet satellite countries. Webb even suggests that Miller might be part of a sheep-dipping operation where intelligence operatives take on multiple identities to infiltrate groups. Now, this is where things get even more confusing. Webb claims that Miller is tied to multiple different aliases, including Vem Steinberg and Vem Miller. He even brings up the idea that Miller's involvement could be linked to something deeper, like international intelligence operations. According to Webb, Miller's multiple passports and fake credentials aren't just a sign of some amateur screw-up. They're part of a more organized effort to gain access to high-profile figures, including Trump. And honestly, this raises way more questions than it answers. All right, I'm going to pause here for a second because I've got to say, something just doesn't feel right about this whole thing. I don't think this was some well-planned assassination attempt, and here's why. The guy had a messy car, fake passes, and illegal guns, but if you were really planning something this big, wouldn't you be more sophisticated? The whole thing seems too sloppy to be a genuine attempt to kill Trump. But then, on the other hand, how do we explain the multiple passports, the fake names, and now these alleged ties to NATO and the OSCE? It's almost like there's something much bigger at play here that we're only scratching the surface of. And let's not forget Mindy Robinson, who has been fiercely defending Miller from the start. She claims this is all a setup, and that the authorities are framing him. According to her, Miller is just a loyal Trump supporter who's been wrongfully targeted. But here's where I've got to ask some tough questions. Mindy, if you're that close to Miller, wouldn't you have known about the multiple passports? Wouldn't you have known about the fake names and all the other shady stuff that's come to light? I'm not saying she's lying, but there's definitely something off here. Maybe she's in denial. Maybe she didn't know the full extent of what Miller was involved in. Or maybe she just doesn't want to believe that her business partner could be tied up in something much darker. Look, I'm not here to bash Mindy Robinson. I actually think she believes what she's saying. But none of the explanations we have for her defense of Miller are good. Either she's in denial, she knew more than she's letting on, or she's experiencing some serious cognitive dissonance. And honestly, none of those are good options. Wouldn't she have some kind of explanation for why Miller was carrying illegal firearms? Wouldn't she have some story about how he was concerned for his personal safety, so he went out and bought a shotgun and a handgun? And if she's really that close to him, wouldn't she have known about the fake credentials, the multiple names, and the passports? That's not something you just forget to mention in a partnership arrangement. My gut tells me that Mindy is going to go radio silent after this, and she probably already regrets sending out that initial post defending him. Now, where does that leave us? Honestly, we're left with more questions than answers. Was this a setup, like Mindy believes? Or is Miller involved in something much deeper, like George Webb is suggesting? I don't have the answer yet, but what I do know is that something doesn't add up. This whole situation is way too messy to just be a misunderstanding, but it's also way too disorganized to be a legitimate assassination attempt. So what do you guys think? Is this just a case of bad luck, or is there something much bigger going on here? Let me know in the comments, and stay tuned because we're going to keep digging into this story and bring you updates as they come in. Thanks for watching.